Last December, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence's Detention and Interrogation Program report made the big splash all over the major network news. The report, which took 5 years and $40 million to compile, detailed in over 6,000 pages the torture conducted on captured enemy combatants by the CIA and others at black sites located around the entire globe. Republicans criticized the report, stating that releasing the information about Americans' covert activities might harm soldiers and agents abroad. Democrats praised the report for its diligence, but few pushed President Obama to prosecute the individuals who had actually conducted illegal torture. But what was perhaps most astonishing about the report was that the methods of torture conducted on enemy combatants were actually developed from a program meant to train captured U.S. soldiers to resist torture and to prevent them from giving away classified information. The program is called SERE, or Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. Well, today we are joined by Michael Kearns, a retired U.S. Air Force veteran and former trainer for the SERE program. Not only does Michael have a distinguished career, he is also the first person to skydive over all 7 continents and even has a novel out called Broken, inspired by some of his many life experiences. But more significantly, it was his whistleblowing which revealed to the public how a domestic program was warped to torture our enemies. Welcome, Michael Kearns.
Michael, thank you very much for coming on the show today. Always a pleasure. Now, Michael, you were a career, you were in the Air Force as a young middle-aged man, you're a career military man. What attitudes did you have, about the U.S. military, and when did you suddenly feel compelled to kind of call foul on the torture program? Like, what brought you to that place?
It was Jim Risen's book that came out in 2006, State of War. I was in Australia and working for their government and read Jim Risen's book, which explained that there was the SERE program, and that's what was reverse engineered. And it also gave a little detail. It said it was the Army's SERE program. So I actually believed, oh gosh, it's the Army's fault. It couldn't have been us Air Force guys.
Yeah. Now what, do you consider yourself a whistleblower? Like, what did you then do when you started learning about this information?
Well, the whistleblowing that I did against my program at Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape at Fairchild Air Force Base, it was for what I called a lack of leadership, toxic leadership. We actually had a commanding officer in my day that was a major, and when he retired, a civilian went off and created his own position and started bringing in his own civilians to run that program. And in fact, I witnessed Dr. Bruce Jessen giving a harsh interrogation on his very first day working for Mr. Aldrich, which shocked me.
Wow.
Well, we just want to talk a little bit about SERE, or survival, as I said, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. This was a program that was founded at the end of the Korean War to aid U.S. soldiers, a noble program in order to avoid capture and coping with torture techniques against them. And I want to focus on, so let's focus on the program itself, since if I'm not incorrect, you graduated the program and were a special survival training program. I want to make sure I get it right. Survival training program operations officer and master instructor. Simply put, like, what was the training like, and was that training effective in what it was supposed to do, which is protect U.S. soldiers when they were in that situation of being held?
Well, let me explain just how the hierarchy of what SERE training is. There's A, B, and C levels, with C being a level where you're actually having to go through a prisoner of war camp experience. Mm-hmm. Our program was a special survival training program. That's actually above and beyond a C-level training. So it's specific to specific operational units, those of which we know of as JSOC, or other strategic reconnaissance organizations like the National Security Agency. So because of their very high risk and also potential for political embarrassment, we just made sure that their organizations had they had one song to sing off of the choir sheet, so to speak.
Right.
And for us, getting in these people that have already completed level C training, they've already had, I guess you'd call it Plato's problem solved, which is experience also countering with knowledge. Is that sometimes just reading, which was level A and B of SEER, reading about it is okay, but when you start getting into being deployed in actual combat operations near or beyond enemy troops, then you want to make sure that they have practiced exactly what they may have to use in the future. So
Having actual practical experience of what might happen. I mean, obviously to a limit.
Oh,
but
it'd be just like the studio. In fact, the studio reminds me of some of the things we used to set up, and it would blow the minds of the people that we'd capture. We'd capture them, and all of a sudden their mask would come off, the hood would come off, and here they were inside of a studio.
Wow.
And we wanted
no idea.
Yeah.
And we'd also, of course, have some kind of foreign national government run the studio.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's fascinating.
So the idea was that you took, not you, you went through the SEER program and you obviously were training within it, but what was taken from the SEER program was the ability to torture as opposed to resisting torture. It was turned on its head, right? And basically that these techniques were then used to torture enemy combatants in the war on terror. That's what you came to discover. So where did you play, I mean, if you read that in Risen's book, where did you ultimately come in to become a whistleblower yourself?
It was after I read an article written by Jeffrey Kay. So it was Jeffrey Kay and Jason Leopold. They had written some articles together, and Jeffrey Kay, who's a psychologist, had connected a few dots for me as I was writing my novel. And those were the names, Aldrich, Jessen, and Mitchell. It was like the trifecta of my novel. And as soon as I saw those three names appear together, and it was totally linked with the Bush-Cheney torture program, the alarm bells went off in my head. Not only that my novel would be potentially a good novel and is exposing these unfortunate acts, but also it upset me beyond compare. It upset me to believe that, you know, our country, which I thought of was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, was actually the antithesis of what I thought I learned
But
in college.
what steps did you then take to basically blow the whistle or to try to alert certain government agencies of what was going on?
Well, I contacted Jeff Kay right away, and Jeff Kay called me within a few hours. I contacted him through email, and then he put me in touch with Physicians for Human Rights, and Physicians for Human Rights then set me up to meet with Jim Risen of the New York Times, and I spent about 6 months with Jim Risen, and nothing progressed. I felt almost 2 years before that, in fact, I'll just, if you don't mind, back up. I did contact Senator Levin when he had the committee. I think it was under the Justice Committee, and it was about the torture program, and I contacted him and said I was part of the survival program. I worked in SEER. I worked with Mitchell, Jessen, and Aldridge. They seemed interested. I had staffers calling me, and again, just like Jim Risen at the New York Times, it seems to be a topic no one wants to discuss.
Well, tell us a little bit about Mitchell and Jessen. You know, why did they engage in these activities, and how were they kind of warping the SEER training tactics to this other end that they ultimately was used to torture?
SEER is a defensive counterintelligence program. So we give it to our own troops for them to protect themselves in case they were held by an enemy combatant that was trying to get information and either embarrass the U.S. government or actually to compromise their mission. So to turn it into an interrogation program, A, is not even what it was intended to do, but B, is incomprehensible to us that worked in SEER, because SEER is one of these defensive programs that you would, if you could imagine being in a room and whenever you did not follow our training, Socrates would whisper in your ear, you'd get your nose in a corner, and we would say subtle hints into your mind to say that maybe when someone else was held in the same experience, they used these kinds of techniques, giving them a hint. And then we say, okay, time's back on, and then we try and get them back into their role. And essentially what we did was role play scenarios. It was, again, it was very much like Socratic questioning, and it was not harmful, although it was quite harsh.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so strange the more we hear about these things and the more we learn about these kind of programs, is that it's almost closer to it's so close to fiction that it's really unsettling. Almost as it's like we don't want it to be so close to television shows like Alias when we see things, and now we're learning it's even worse than what we had. And that brings me to your new book, which is which we talked about a little bit, is Broken, which you co-authored with Ronald B. Solomon. Now, the book is fictional, obviously, but you kind of paralleled it. How close does the book come to representing your career and your thoughts, at least philosophically, as a military man looking back on it now?
I would say the role of my own role in the book, which is Captain Charles Ponce, a.k.a. Chauncey, I'm sorry, that he actually is probably the closest thing written about my life and my background that I could comprehend. I mean, Ron Solomon and I, we spent about 3 years putting this together, and he really got into my mind. I took him out to see other people that had been through the SEER program, the Navy SEALs, buddies of mine on the West Coast, and those are some of the other characters that are in the book, and it's true to who we are, but not true to the actual exact replication of the SEER torture program, because I had no business doing that. I didn't do the torture program, the SEER program, which unfortunately many people think I did because I'm associated with it.
Right, I can imagine. But it does, the book sounds like it provides a really great insight, though, into your life, your career, and what you dealt with. And we'll give kind of a nice counterbalance to, you know, what we learned about what was used from SEER and put into the torture program. Michael Kearns, thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us and providing this information to us. Always a pleasure.
Well, thank you all for watching the Hawks.
We will continue.
And hopefully the movie Broken will come out soon.
Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Let's keep our fingers
we
crossed.
will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Your mother probably told you never